All right, welcome. Let's think of this as your very first workshop on the path to financial freedom. And you know what? It might just be the most important one you ever attend. We're not going to start with spreadsheets or business plans. Nope. We're starting with the one tool that will decide your success more than anything else, your mindset.
So, let's dive right in with a question that might shake things up a little. What if everything you've ever been told, get good grades, find a safe job, work your way up, is actually the very thing stopping you from building real wealth? What if all that advice is really just designed to make you a great employee, not a successful entrepreneur?
This brings us to this incredible real-world story. It's about two men, both were smart, both worked incredibly hard, and from the outside, both look successful. And yet, their financial lives couldn't have been more different. One struggled with bills his whole life, and the other became one of the richest men in his state. How does that happen?
Well, this story comes from the author Robert Kiyosaki. He had this really unique upbringing where he had two father figures giving him advice. And as he says, it gave him a choice between two completely different ways of looking at the world, and especially how to look at money.
So for the rest of our time here, I want you to think of these two men as your potential mentors. You've got two paths in front of you. You can follow the guy who built a very respectable career, or you can follow the guy who built an empire from pretty much nothing. Their advice, as you'll see, leads to two totally different destinations.
Now this is where it gets wild. Just look at the contrast here. The man he called Poor Dad, his biological father, was brilliant. I mean, a PhD, degrees from Stanford, Chicago, a top government official. By any traditional standard, a massive success. But he struggled with money his entire life. Then you have Rich Dad, who didn't even finish 8th grade. No fancy degrees, no resume, but he built this huge business empire. So right away, it wasn't about grades or the job title. Something else was going on.
And that something else is exactly what we're talking about today. It's what we call the mindset switch. It's about completely rewiring your brain from thinking like an employee who trades time for money to thinking like an owner who builds systems to have money work for them. Let's break down what that actually looks like.
And this right here is maybe the best example. Whenever Poor Dad faced a financial challenge, his automatic response was, "I can't afford it." It's a statement, a full stop. It literally shuts down your brain. But Rich Dad, he wouldn't let himself say that. He would force his brain to fire up by asking a question. How can I afford it? See the difference? That simple question opens up a world of possibilities and kicks your brain into problem-solving mode.
Here's the next huge shift. The traditional path, the Poor Dad way, is all about working for money. You trade your time, your life energy for a paycheck. The problem is you only have so much time. Rich Dad's goal was the complete opposite. He focused on one thing: acquiring assets, things like businesses or real estate that would make money for him whether he was working or not. His money became his best employee.
Okay, this one really messes with a lot of people's idea of wealth. Most of us are taught that our house is our biggest asset. That's exactly what Poor Dad believed. But Rich Dad had a brutally simple definition. An asset puts money in your pocket, a liability takes money out of your pocket. Period. So that house, with the mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance, the repairs, is constantly taking money out. Understanding that simple distinction, that's the foundation of all financial intelligence.
And the list of opposing advice just goes on and on. Poor Dad would say, study hard so you can find a good company to work for. Rich Dad said, study hard so you can find a good company to buy. When the paychecks came in, Poor Dad would pay all his bills first and then see if anything was left to save. Rich Dad, he paid himself first. His investments were his most important bill, which forced him to get creative and find a way to pay everyone else.
Let's just sit with this for a second, because this is probably the most powerful idea of all. Being broke is a situation. It's temporary. You don't have enough cash right now. We've all been there. But being poor, in this way of thinking, is a mindset. It's an attitude. It's that voice in your head that says, I can't. And because it's a state of mind, it can last forever.
So as we wrap up, it all comes back to one key question. When you look at the story of these two men, what's the single greatest asset you have for building wealth? What did the 8th grade dropout have that the highly educated PhD didn't seem to use?
It's this, plain and simple. The most powerful tool in your financial toolbox isn't your education, or your salary, or even the money you have saved. It's your mind.
Rich Dad became wealthy because he spent his whole life training his mind to see opportunities, to understand how money really works, and to solve problems. He invested in his financial IQ, and that is the one asset that can build every other asset.
And that really is the whole point of this workshop. The choice between these two paths, these two mentors, it all happens right between your ears. If I can't is the end of the road, and how can I is the beginning of an adventure, then the final question I'll leave you with is this: what new question will you start asking yourself today?